Hi, this is David from AshOT, and tonight we're going to be reviewing the 2022 version of the Alienware M15R7. Now if you're thinking, hey, I've seen that before, it's probably because you have, because this year, as with the X series, Alienware have kept the chassis exactly the same, only the internals have been upgraded. Now we've already reviewed the new Alienware X14, X15 and X17 range of laptops, but tonight we're looking at the more cost-conscious M series range, the M15R7, getting the new 12th gen Intel i7 12700H, an NVIDIA RTX 3070 Ti, 16GB of DDR5 RAM, and a 1TB M.2 Gen 4 SSD. And it does come with a 165Hz base 1080p panel and Wi-Fi 6. So overall, you're getting good specifications for your money. Now the laptop itself is quite chunky and heavy, coming in at 2.6 kilograms. So this is definitely bigger and heavier than the X series. But in my opinion, the port placement is actually better on this model than the X series, with two USB Type A ports on one side, an RJ45 and headset jack on the other, and on the rear we've got the power jack, a Thunderbolt 4, an HDMI 2.1, and another USB Type A port. So a great selection of ports overall. We also get a great selection of RGB with the lit alien head on the lid, the Tron ring at the back of the laptop, the per-key RGB backlight on the keyboard, and the lit alien head power button. Opening the lid is smooth, yet the hinges are solid. So there's no wobble on the screen when you're typing on your lap with this laptop, and that's always great. The palm rest is the usual soft touch finish, which feels great to actually use and type on, but unfortunately it does pick up your finger oil, so you will get some marks. You will have to clean this regularly. The touchpad is responsive, although it's quite small, and doesn't feel quite as premium as the Alienware X series. But in my day-to-day use, I found no problems at all, and gestures work great, and it tracks really well. Moving up to the keyboard, as I said, we've got the per-key RGB lighting, but unfortunately the secondary functions aren't lit on any of the Alienwares for this year and last year. The keyboard itself is still fantastic to type on, with a good layout, apart from the fact that the cursor keys are crushed into the keyboard. And at the far right of the keyboard, we have some multimedia keys as well, such as muting the microphone, muting the volume and volume up and down. That is something that's quite handy, and I've really been enjoying that, using that lately, especially the muting the microphone button. And when you configure your laptop, you do get the chance to change your standard keyboard to the Cherry MX keyboard. So if you like that Cherry mechanical sort of blue switch, that's quite a nice option, but that will usually cost you about £100. Above the screen, you can see we've got plenty of venting. It takes a lot of air in from the top and the bottom. Now this is great because it does allow a lot of airflow through the laptop, but you're not going to be wanting to run this laptop with the lid closed, maybe when you're docked to another screen, because then you're going to be totally blocking the airflow from the top of the machine. Now the Alienware power button is lit, as I mentioned earlier, and this is either orange when you're on battery, blue if you're fully charged, or flashing blue and orange when your actual battery's charging. And this is something I've always loved about Alienware. It's quite nice. If you ever accidentally knock your power lead out the back of your laptop, or you're forgetting to turn it on at the wall, you know instantly that you're on battery. Now, as usual with Alienware, the speakers sound very average. They sound like this. Audio test at 50% volume. %100% volume. Now moving up to the screen, with this model I've just decided to get in the base 165Hz 1080p panel. And I have to be honest, I'm really quite impressed with it. Now I do normally get the QHD panel because that is my resolution of choice, but I thought as I haven't had a 1080p for a while, let's give it a go. Now this screen is responsive, it's got good colours, and it's also very bright. So if you do need to save some money and you're not bothered about the QHD image quality, this is still a great panel, especially if you're just buying this machine for gaming. Now obviously, my preferred resolution is that QHD, and if you're using this for work and play, I would recommend you spend the extra £200 for that QHD panel. There is also a 360Hz 1080p panel. I don't really recommend that for most people because this is still a responsive panel anyway. Now, as we move above the actual screen, we've got the webcam, and it looks like this. This is a test of the webcam and the microphones on the Alienware M15R7 laptop. And with this 1080p base panel, there's no Windows Hello facial recognition. And that's a real shame. So with this model, there's actually no way of logging into the machine other than typing a password. Really feel like I'm going back 10 years. But if you do upgrade to the QHD panel or the 360Hz 1080p panel, then all of a sudden you get that infrared Windows Hello technology included. So before we move on to the actual performance of this laptop, let's open it up and take a look inside. And the good news with this M15R6, unlike the X15 range, the RAM is actually socketed. And in this model, you can see we've got two 8GB DDR5 4800MHz RAM sticks. Now this is great, so it means you could upgrade it yourself later on down the line, but be aware at the moment it's quite difficult getting hold of DDR RAM kits, so I would recommend getting at least 16GB or 32GB, depending on what you need out of the gate. Now, later on down the line, this will be readily available and you will be able to upgrade it yourself. We also get two Gen 4 M.2 PCIe SSD slots, and the 1TB SSD that's included with this laptop is a Gen 4 Samsung drive, and it's very quick. But what is really nice to see this year is the second slot, which is not populated, has the actual SSD bracket and heatsink. Now, if you remember my M15R5 video from about a year ago, they didn't even include the bracket, let alone the heatsink on that SSD, making it very difficult to add that second drive yourself. But with this one, it's a case of just taking off the actual heatsink, popping your drive in, popping the actual heatsink back on, and you're away. Good work, Dell. Also, the Wi-Fi card is socketed. Now, Wi-Fi 6, I'm sure no one's going to need to upgrade this anytime soon, but it's nice that you do have that option with this model. Now, let's get on to what's really important, because obviously the chassis and everything's the same with this model, but the performance isn't going to be. What with this 12th gen CPU. Now, the good news is, if you buy the 3070 Ti or the 3080 model, you do get their Element 31 thermal compound. Now, this is the 3070 Ti, and I have to be honest, it's made a big difference over last year's model that I tested. Running the CPU with my Cinebench and Geekbench benchmarks, I was really impressed at how well this CPU copes. It manages to keep up with about 115 watts for an extended period of time, and then it will drop back, depending on the fan profile that you're on, to about 70 to 100 watts. This is really impressive, especially for the entry level range, and last year's M15R6 with the Intel CPU was nowhere near as good as this model. And as with the X series range that we've reviewed, the performance of these 12th gen CPUs are absolutely incredible. Cinebench scores and Geekbench scores are absolutely out of this world. Now I want to look at the actual GPU, because this is the first time we've had a 3070 Ti into the studio. Now this model comes with a 140 watt TGP on the 3070 Ti, so that's actually 10 watts less than the maximum rated TGP from NVIDIA. We have just had a Legion in, which also has a 3070 Ti, and that does come with 150 watt TGP. So we will at a later date be putting these two models head to head to see how much difference they do actually perform. But overall in my gaming tests so far, this 140 watt 3070 Ti has been absolutely solid. And if I'm honest, it's actually not far off last year's 3080 model. So a really impressive job with these 3070 Ti's. So we're going to play a bit of Apex Legends, and I am running it at 1080p max settings. So what we're going to do is, once we've been playing this for a while, I'm going to be testing the keyboard temperatures and the fan noise. Now I'm just running this in the balanced Alienware profile, purely because I didn't feel that there was a significant benefit to running it in the full fan mode, except for the extra noise. Obviously that will bring the temps down a little bit, but then you're going to get an extra probably about 3 or 4 decibels higher fan noise. Okay, so I've been playing for about an hour now on Apex. Now the good news is, as you can see, the temperatures are pretty well managed, and this is on the balance profile. Now we're using about 46 to 50 watts on the CPU, and we're still in the 80s, so that's pretty impressive. We're getting our pretty much solid 165 Hz to this panel, so everything is nice and smooth. And as I say, the temperatures are really very respectable. Now the fan noise, this is on the balance profile. So 51 decibels on balance. Now looking at the temperature on the keyboard, see the palm rest, the WSD keys, only 34 degrees, very comfortable. As we move to the middle of the keyboard, we're moving up to about 39, so it's still, you don't usually have your hand here, but it's still pretty comfortable anyway. As we move back round, we drop off again. Now, as usual with all gaming laptops, the hotspot is reserved right at the very top at the back at 51 degrees centigrade. But you're never going to put your hand here, so this is obviously where it's exhausting all the heat out of the laptop. So overall, very impressive and a very nice gaming experience. So the performance is really impressive on this laptop, but as per usual with these 12th gen CPUs, battery life has been absolutely average. This is something that's a real shame, and I thought we would have had much better battery life with these 12th gen CPUs. I don't understand what's the point of having these efficiency cores when the battery life is worse than last year's models. This model, on our usual Wi-Fi streaming test, running YouTube at 200 nits of brightness and the speakers at 50%, we managed to get 5 hours and 50 minutes out of this laptop. Now I am running it at its 165 Hertz panel speed. I could probably squeeze a bit more if I changed it down to 60, but I'm not going to be faffing around with things like that to show you what the battery life is like, because most people won't be doing that anyway. So nearly 6 hours on light use. Just like the X series, it's nothing special with these. If you're hitting them hard, you're probably looking at 3 hours on a good day. So a bit disappointing really from these 12th gen CPUs. Also being the entry-level M series range of laptops, you don't get the nice new power brick. And instead, we get the old-fashioned 240 watt power brick. Now this is a real shame because this thing is absolutely monstrously big compared to the new 240 watt Slim. So these are still expensive laptops, Dell. Surely you could give us the new power bricks no matter which model we buy. So on to the conclusion. I've used this laptop for a fair while now and I've absolutely loved it. It's a great machine. I love the port placements on this model more so than the X series range of laptops, especially because I'm always plugging USBs in and out. It's so handy having them on the side. I know it seems crazy moaning about that, but when you've got to plug things into the back of the X series range of laptops, it does get annoying very quickly. The performance on this model is right up there with the X series range. And last year, the M15R6 was quite subpar compared to the Alienware X series. So to have such an improvement this year on this model, I've been really impressed. And the 3070 Ti has really impressed me as well. It may only be 140 watts out of the maximum 150. It flows in games. And I definitely reckon for most people, the 3070 Ti is the card you should be looking at. It's a lot cheaper than the 3080 Ti with the performance that's nearly on last year's 3080 performance.